Hello everyone. Welcome to today's International School Grounds Alliance webinar. I'm coming to you from Perth in Western Australia. Normally I would be able to say that I'm coming to you from sunny Perth, but it's cold and stormy today and we've had lots of rain, which my garden is loving, but it may get a bit noisy if it starts to hail. It's a bit of a happy coincidence that our webinar today falls in the middle of NAIDOC week. We chose the dates months ago. For those of you outside of Australia who will be watching the recording, NAIDOC Week is a celebration of the history, culture and achievements of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So it's a perfect fit for our theme of connecting to country, as this week's NAIDOC Week theme is Heal Country. So it's particularly important that I acknowledge that I live here in the home of the Whadjuk people, part of the Noongar Nation, the traditional owners and custodians of our part of Western Australia. And I want to pay my respects to the Noongar elders, past, present and emerging. Christine's from Walpole, which is right down the south coast of Western Australia. Elaine's here in Perth. And then we have Kat, who's part of CEO of Millennium Kids.
July ISGA, which is the Noongar words for understanding country. Noongar is our local Aboriginal language. We're focusing in on our school bushland. This bushland is, could I have the slide, please? Oh, yeah. This bushland is unique remnant native bush, and I'm going to outline the STEM learning that happens in an outdoor classroom context. STEM learning is vital in our growing, changing world. For STEM education to be meaningful and empowering, it needs to be focused on solving real problems identified by the students themselves, and this is the case in our Bushland project. Our work in the bushland therefore links with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, in particular Goal 3, Good Health and Wellbeing, Goal 4, Quality Education, Goal 13, Climate Action, Goal 15, Life on Land, 16, Peace and Justice, and 17, Partnerships for Goals. And all those aspects will be reflected in the work that we do. July ISGA is also the name of a book created by the students to tell their story of the STEM project. This book used an online program and features the trail through the remnant bushland, and there's 8 stations on this trail, all with signage showcasing students' artwork and the research they did on different species there. The official opening of the bush trail is also documented in the book. Since 2016, students created 2 other books on their bushland learning, one on butterflies and the other on flora and fauna species. This presentation will show some of the pages from the current book to illustrate the STEM project in action. We'll provide information first on my role at the school, the location of the school, background to the STEM project, and examples of student work in STEM. For simplicity, I've divided STEM into the science, technologies, engineering, and maths aspects of the project. However, in reality, STEM is enacted from a whole systems thinking perspective, not as silo learning areas. Now, my role at the school is as the cross-curriculum leader. This entails supporting staff embed the 3 cross-curriculum priorities of the West Australian curriculum. These priorities are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures, Australia's engagement with Asia, and sustainability. I am also a member of the school's STEM committee, and it is through this engagement in this committee that substantial embedding of the cross-curriculum priorities is achieved. The school is in the metropolitan area of Perth. We're about 8 kilometres north of the city in a built-up suburban area. The school is an active member of the Sustainable Schools Initiative, and as such, we address all the different aspects of the ecological footprint and the social handprint. We have 2 nature play areas in the school grounds and ongoing biodiversity initiatives, including being a member of the Stephanie Alexander Kitchen Garden Foundation. We're an energy smart, waste wise, water wise and your move school, and we address different aspects of the social handprint like the Aboriginal issues and cultural and social diversity. The school site includes 1.4 hectares of remnant bushland, which is the focus of our STEM work and also supports the different aspects of the footprint and the handprint. Looking at STEM in the school bushland, Karijini Budget is ongoing and has been implemented over many years with many different issues addressed at different times. In 2016, it was about the local butterflies. In 2019, the students created a bush trail with signage that incorporated their art and research findings. There were QR codes on the signs and augmented reality. This bush trail is open to the wider community, not just for the school, because we want to make a difference in caring for country and sharing what we've learnt and showing how we solve problems. This year, the students want to focus on the problem of bobtail goannas being killed when they leave the bushland and cross the busy streets to the school. The page of the book shown now illustrates some of the actions the students have taken to address STEM problems. They've built bird, bat and native bee boxes. They've planted host plants for native butterflies. They've cared for injured microbats and then released them back into the bushland. All this was done in the context of learning from Aboriginal educators and artists about how to care for country. Next slide, please. This slide features the contributions of Aboriginal educators and artists to our STEM program. The 6 seasons Noongar calendar shows when different flora and fauna are in flower or the animals are active. The Noongar artists shown in the slide are working with students on paintings showing the life cycle of different local butterfly species. The top left-hand photo shows biological monitoring of the site using 360-degree photography, while the mechanoid in the middle top picture is sharing Noongar words for different flora and fauna in the bushland with a class of students. Next slide, please. Our school is involved in an initiative called Two-Way Science. This initiative was started by CSIRO, our National Science Research Organisation, and has now been taken on board by the West Australian Department of Education. The idea is to bring together Indigenous knowledges and Western science methodologies to inform each other. 2 examples are shown here. First, Year 3 chemical science that focuses on changes in states of matters such as heating resin or beeswax or when cooking. A Year 6 chemical science unit investigated resin found in native flora such as grass trees, marri as shown, and spinifex plants. This resin, when combined with 2 other materials, forms an extremely strong glue that was traditionally used by Aboriginal people for various purposes to solve particular problems. This is STEM in action. Next slide, please. Here's another example of our two-way science STEM work in the bushland. Here we see a Noongar educator working with Year 4 class in an earth and space science lesson. The children are doing a mapping activity in the bushland, and the Noongar educator is guiding them in that process. Next slide, please. Technologies are embedded into our bushland STEM project. On this slide, top right, you can see students using a GPS to record locations of targeted flora. This is actually with Katrina from Millennium Kids, one of the later presenters in this webinar. Other photos show students investigating different species of flora. Also shown are the brochures of flora and fauna created by Year 4 students for distribution to the general public when the Bush Trail was officially opened. You may have noticed on all the pages of the book that have been shown so far, there are QR codes and augmented reality links. Students in Year 3 prepared the QR codes while the Year 6s worked on augmented reality. The QR codes take you to audio and video clips, such as the Noongar Welcome to Country at the start of the Bush Trail. Each sign along the trail features a different plant or animal, and the QR codes link to additional information, while the augmented reality involves a quiz about that plant or animal with additional animated information. Students also engaged in the bushland in other ways, such as pre-primary students collecting materials to make maya-mayas, their bush huts, and Year 6s designing fireproof housing in the context of bushfires threatening homes. Next slide, please. Engineering is another aspect of STEM that's embedded into what we do. And for our work in the bushland, this involves looking at erosion control, finding practical solutions to bobtail deaths, and managing weeds. Students have been and continue to be involved in all these aspects of engineering. Next slide, please. As part of the STEM project, students from different year levels engaged in a range of mathematical activities, such as making 1 metre square quadrats for biological investigations, or measuring different aspects of the bush site as listed on the slide. Next slide, please. In Western Australia, a consortium of science and maths associations work together to create STEM learning projects. Those projects can be adapted to our work in the bushland, and they're listed on the slide. So for people interested in starting this bushland STEM challenge, there are resources available to help. For example, the pre-primary students can do an animal rescue project that's relevant to our current investigations on saving bobtails from being run over on the busy streets around the school. The Year 6 bushfire STEM project that we just mentioned, that's another one that's listed as being available. There's the Year 2 Every Bird Needs a Home, resulted in more bird and native bee homes being made and installed in the bushland. So those STEM learning projects are very helpful if you're just starting on the learning journey. Last slide, please. Clearly, our Bushland STEM project brings together many different aspects of caring for country. Practical solutions to real problems are provided. Children enjoy their outdoor classroom lessons in the bushland. They've engaged with Noongar educators and artists to deepen their learning and understandings. They've worked with many different partners to achieve practical solutions, such as with the local government authority. You can see the picture of the mayor using his iPhone to access QR and AR sites from the opening sign of the Bush Trail. You can see how all the different aspects of this STEM project link together to create positive outcomes. Local outcomes have included enhanced care of our unique bushland in an outdoor classroom setting, a STEM setting that is real life and has a very meaningful context. There's been sustained engagement with Noongar educated and artists and this has built positive community relationships and deeper understandings of Noongar knowledge and culture. Students have communicated their findings with their peers, the whole school community, the wider local community, as well as other schools across the state, using a wide range of strategies to get their message across. State impacts have involved professional learning sessions across WA by the Department of Education that have included videos, and as well as the student-created books have been distributed to people across WA. National impacts have been demonstrated by the CSIRO video recognition of the work the school has been doing in this field. Finally, international impacts have been shown through the school sharing this STEM initiative at workshops at World Environmental Education Congresses. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to your feedback.
Okay, can you see?
We certainly can.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
And hello everyone, I'm coming from Menang country, which is also part of the Noongar Nation. I'm Christine Cook and Principal of Walpole Primary School. Our connections to country come about because we live in such a beautiful part of the world. Walpole is surrounded by national parks. We're on the south coast of Western Australia. So we're also on the coast. Very small community of about 400 people. And, okay. It's not quite working the way. I'm going to close that, sorry. It was working.
It's always the way, isn't it?
I've got two screens and I had it beautifully set up so that I could watch it on one and read it on the other. Okay, so can you see my screen still?
Yes, we can.
Beautiful.
Yes, and you've got your notes, beautiful.
And I've got my notes, okay. So
Thank you
our
very
school, that's okay. Our school motto is Nature, Culture, Future. And we try and connect our students to the environment, to their peers, to the adults and our community. And I guess we've got a beautiful environment to be able to do that. We quite often take students outside of the classrooms and look for opportunities to extend their learning in a real life situation. Some students think they're playing and don't realise that they're learning and are much more engaged. Sometimes students think they're playing and they are playing, they're not actually learning, so we need to reconnect them to what it is we're expecting of them. We're also part of the Stephanie Alexander Kitchen Garden program, and our PNC built us a lovely kitchen for the students to cook produce from the garden. We've got a great gardener who takes a couple of students out every day into the garden where they plant and weed and look after the chooks and the ducks. And we did have a program where the students actually cooked one day a week for the whole of the school, but we lost our AIEO staff member who was doing that with the students, and we haven't taken it up since COVID. The students sort of enjoy participating in the kitchen garden in the fact that they get to grow their own produce and identify what they're growing and experiment with it, with eating things they might not normally eat. We've also got quite a large playground for a small school. We've only got 47 students at the school. We have a bush area that we parkland clear that the students can play in, and they're always finding great things to do with the sticks in the playground. We try and have different areas in our school grounds where the kids can be quiet, they can be noisy, they can sit by themselves or they can join in with others. We try and provide some reasonable risk, and the students are encouraged to do a bit of a risk analysis before they do something and decide whether it's worth doing or not. And we also have try and empower students to look out for others, and we have a student meeting once a week, and if the students see others doing things that they don't think are safe, they'll bring it up in the student meeting and discuss it. And most times decisions are made, such as they're allowed to climb a tree, but the students wanted to put a tie at a certain point to suggest that climbing over that point wasn't very safe, so that's what they did. We look at ways of taking the students outside of the school. So they have, just in the last few weeks, gone to the Walpole Environment Hub and held a bit of an exhibition there that they've invited locals or tourists to come in and have a little bit of a look. They've gone to the treetop walk where they've surveyed people going through that tourist attraction to find out what brings them to Walpole and what they think of the area. They've held an art exhibition at the Petrichor Gallery. One of the teachers takes the students out once a fortnight and does bush school with them. So she encourages them to explore their bush surroundings or water surroundings and ask lots of questions, starting with what. So we also engage a lot with our community, being in such a small town. Our nearest town is 67 kilometres away, so we're not close to lots of other people. Our students are involved in Anzac events, Christmas carols. One of our parents is a Buddhist and invited a Buddhist monk, so the school participated in that. We invite older people to come into the school. They might help with cooking, they might play games, always looking for opportunities to engage with our community. We have a program called URWalpole that operates in term 2 every year. It's a cross-curricular whole school program that has our nature, future, culture theme running through it, and we look at opportunities to really embed the knowledge that we learn in the classrooms in our whole environment. We take sort of big picture themes and then look at it from a local context. We were going to do 2020 to 2040 last year, but with COVID it didn't happen. So this year's theme was 2021 to 41, future-proofing Walpole, and students learnt about regenerative farming, renewable energy, habitat protection and global warming. We've got quokkas that live around the Walpole town site, and the KP1 students, their aim was looking at ways to stop them being run over by cars. The year 4, 5, 6 class go on a camp every year, and they link their camp to our URWalpole program. So they went to recycling sites in Perth. They visited regenerative farms. They went just down to the local depot office and had a look at their weather meter, because they're looking at rainfall and the impact on our local forest. A lot of our students actually choose scientific careers because of their strong science knowledge learned during our URWalpole programs. Student impact. We haven't conducted any specific research on how these programs impact on the learning of our students, but what we do know, and probably more so when we have visitors to the school, is how engaged our students are. So they are highly interested in learning all the time, whether they're in the classrooms or outdoors. And I think the programs that we run allow that. We feel that we're preparing them to be active participants in our world. Parents are very satisfied with the school, and we also try and engage them as much as possible. Again, pre-COVID, we were doing STEM nights where parents would come in and participate with the students in activities that we could quite often run in the classrooms. There's a very high satisfaction rate with our environmental programs that we run. Any questions?
Sorry. Thank you so much, Chris.
I'll just start because, of course, my screen sharing ability has disappeared in between the other presentations. So just bear with me while I get it back up. Let me tell you a little bit about Millennium Kids while we start. So Millennium Kids started 26 years ago based on the opinions of young people and their need for wanting to have a say about the world that they live in. And I was fortunate enough to work with young people who wanted to make a difference. So can you see the first slide now?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so Millennium Kids started with a group of young people who wanted to change the world, basically. And those young people attended a United Nations conference from my class in 1996. And 1995, and it was really the birth of us talking about student voice and engagement. The conference happened in the UK and it was born out of Rio 1992, where they wrote that young people had a right to say about the state of their nation and the decisions that adults were making for them. As a classroom teacher, I thought that students having an opinion was always a really interesting point to start any discussion or any project work. And so when these young people came back and talked about this idea that young people had a right to say about the bushland and the natural spaces in the area that we were working in through our primary school, I thought it was a really interesting focus. I didn't ever go back to the formal classroom after that United Nations conference. We basically ran an international conference led by young people for young people in 1996. And over the next 2 years, we decided to become a not-for-profit. And so Millennium Kids is a not-for-profit in its own right. It's run by young people, and the young people on the screen that you can see are board members. They interview young people, survey young people, and we come up with the issues that young people think are most important to them. We have a project-based learning skills for life framework that we use, and we work across Western Australia, Indonesia, and South Africa. Really, the premise of Millennium Kids is that young people are the best theorists because they haven't been educated in accepting our routine social practices as natural. And I think it's really interesting that there are lots of great examples of research that is being done regionally and internationally around having young people on planning committees. And there's some fabulous research that comes out of the UK at the moment that talks about 5- and 6-year-olds being involved in serious city planning and the sorts of planning that they incorporate that adults no longer think about. Our young people are involved in creating the resources for Millennium Kids, and this is Tyrese, and he does our Indigenous acknowledgement. We're going to leave the Indigenous acknowledgement because we've talked about NAIDOC Week. I'm currently on Noongar country, but I have the privilege of working in various different areas of this state and overseas. And what's interesting is, as we meet both young people in the city, in the country, and in villages in Indonesia and South Africa, is their questions are very similar and their concerns are very similar. Over the last 5 years, the top priorities for young people have been loss of canopy in their cities or in the mountain areas of Indonesia and across parts of South Africa, either through development, poor development, bushfires, or industry practice. And in Western Australia, we surveyed 500 young people about the top issues. And in the 500 young people surveying, climate change and loss of canopy were the top two, with waste coming a close third. So we took the ideas of those young people and we worked with about 40 young people to create a project which is called Green Lab. And we looked at interviewing young people about why they were concerned around loss of canopy and what they thought the issues were. We networked with teachers, we networked with principals, government agencies, and private landowners. And we looked at mapping a project to the urban canopy strategies across our Perth city. The really interesting part about this process was that through engagement with different stakeholders, students looked at the fact that there were 6 or 7 government agencies that were in fact in control of urban canopy. So as an example, you might be a teacher working for the education department, and the education department's bush, like the one that we talked about with Elaine, is managed by the education department. But across the road and down the street, we might have a piece of bushland that was managed by the local government. You might also have a number of state agencies involved in managing remnant vegetation. So you might have the Department for Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions, you might have main roads, you might have the Water Corporation. All these different agencies were managing tree canopy or remnant bush or space in schools. And our young people were asked to put a series of questions together. And the question that was asked the most was, why don't the adults talk to each other? Through our program, the most important part of Millennium Kids is what we call student voice and engagement, or children's voice. And through the process, our young people identify areas that they think are critical to protecting urban canopy. And the story that I'm going to share with you today is a young person who's a member of Millennium Kids and on our board, who identified an area not far from his home. This is a community project, so Millennium Kids supports schools in using student voice and engagement around a variety of the sustainability goals, but the one we're discussing today is particularly around climate change and life on land. The young person that identified this park is Jacob. He lives not far from it, and he looked at the park as an area that could help educate wider communities about urban canopy, and he helped design a weekend program which was attended by about 30 young people and their families. Through the day, we looked at using drones to monitor canopy and get some data around the percentage of canopy at the park. We interviewed people who'd lived in the area for 30 or 40 years who had stories of the park over time. We also looked at collecting the history of change in the area. That was a series of aerial photographs. And the young people identified a number of issues at the park. They discovered that, in fact, the park is part of an urban trail of wetlands, and that it's connected to Wajak trail that takes a street walk from this particular park to a number of other wetlands in the area. They also looked at the biodiversity that needed the park and the sorts of vegetation that the biodiversity required. So through that process, they identified that this very parkland park with no remnant vegetation was the home of the oblong tortoise. And they looked at developing a project that could monitor the oblong tortoise, collect data around its breeding patterns, and help people understand the connection between each of the wetland sites. There was a discussion about the park and the park users. So they mapped who used the park, and they looked at the various places within the park that different people use. So they noted bike users. There was an area that was available for free play, where children climbed trees and built cubby houses. There were also picnickers, people playing football. There were a whole range of users, and the young people discussed the management of how do you sustain canopy, how do you have play, how do you have wildlife, how do you have picnickers, all in what is a very small space. The young people do what is called futures thinking. So once they look at what the area was in the past, they get the opportunity to map the area and then create their future vision. And from that future visioning exercise, we identify what we could do next. And then young people in our organisation, whether it be on our community programs or in our school programs, pitch what they would like to do next. In this particular project, the young people pitched activities that linked Indigenous thinking and mental health and wellbeing. And we employed an Indigenous artist local to the area called Chantel Walsh. And they looked at working with her to create an art piece that told the story of the park prior to colonisation. And they featured the oblong turtle and the different animals that would have lived in the wetland. They used it as a mental health and wellbeing activity. So this is actually a 3-metre mural, and the young people could go and play and work with citizen scientists and then come back to this art piece to sit and contemplate and just chill, basically. So overall, Millennium Kids uses the Student Voice and Engagement Project to define projects in their area. We've been quite prescriptive in how young people can choose their own project. So once they come through the process of exploring a site, they can choose to educate the public around a particular issue. And this particular issue was alerting the community to the precious nature of this park and the fact that it was habitat. They also look at behaviour change, and they were very concerned that in this particular area, people were feeding the local oblong turtle, and they were concerned that this could have an impact on the health of the turtles. They look at advocacy, so they created a report and have presented it to the local member of Parliament. They've looked at design and innovation, how people could access the site through a series of bridges without actually impacting the turtle. They looked at community action, which is a tree planting day, and they've looked at new rules and regulations around canopy and how they can protect the canopy in the area long term. So that's a little snapshot around Millennium Kids, and we work on a variety of different projects, but the one that is most important to us at the moment is loss of canopy at schools. And our Green Lab initiative is focused on helping schools maintain their canopy and increase their canopy.
Thank you so much, Kat. That was just lovely.